Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DMV Business Show. I'm your host, Otto Sevilla, and today our special guest is Sam McKenna. Sam is the founder of Samsales Consulting. She's an award-winning sales leader with over 15 years of experience in enterprise sales. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure to be here. And especially with a local face for once. So nice to do that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. So before we go into you, if you can just maybe give us a general overview, what is Sam Sales?
What is Sam Sales? So this is a consultancy that I started almost 2 years ago. We do a variety of things for mostly SaaS clients. Probably about 60% of our clients are SaaS, but we've got some random ones in there as well. We do everything from consulting to rewriting your sales messaging. That's an outreach and sales off to running a BDR hotline to train all of your young sales minds. What else do we do? Tons of training, tons of LinkedIn training as well, given my background. And I think that pretty much wraps it up. But we're a mighty little team, all female team of about 16 of us. So we grew pretty quickly overnight.
That's a lot of growth in just a 2-year period, which we're going to go into a little later, but that's amazing. Congrats.
Thanks. Yeah, we're pretty proud of where we've grown.
So just to rewind the clock all the way back, you're not originally from the DC, Maryland, Northern Virginia area, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's one of the most positive things about kind of who I am and my background and my character. But I'm originally from Switzerland, and I moved to the States when I was about 5 years old. In fact, to the DC area for a few years, and no one ever believes me because I don't have an accent. When I moved to the States, everybody made fun of me for being a French speaker. So I learned English as quickly as I could. But now, much to my family's chagrin, when I do speak French, it's with an American accent instead. So they're not thrilled about that, to say the least.
Okay. Do you remember much as far as pre 5 years old back in Switzerland?
Yeah, from that age, probably not so much, but both my parents were entrepreneurs. So my father was a hotelier. He ran a bunch of hotels throughout his whole career. And my mom ran an import-export business for any Seinfeld fans out there. Always gets a laugh, but out of Venice. So we would go back all the time to Venice and to Switzerland. My family was still there. So I probably about every 8 to 10 weeks, we went back to Europe to the chagrin of my teachers who were like, "You're never in school." But I got a hell of an education from that and learning how to, delight their customers and negotiate and just be general business people, which maybe lends to some of our success today.
That's interesting, Sam, that both of your parents were entrepreneurial. These businesses, were they based out of Switzerland or here in America?
So both. So my father started his career actually in St. Thomas, but then went on to work at the Waldorf Astoria in a pretty prestigious role in New York City. I think that's a pretty recognizable hotel, and then moved back over to Europe to run a bunch of properties there, from France to Morocco. Also not being in Europe there, but across the pond at the very least. And my mom, the business was headquartered out of the United States, but she actually did import exports with Venetian glass, and then items to bring from the States over to Venice as well. So lots of schmoozing, lots of client engagements, a lot of basically what we do in sales.
Sure. So when you moved here to the States at 5, did you immediately land in the DMV area?
Yeah, we moved to just outside DC, so in McLean, Virginia. We were there for about 4 years, and then my mom got this harebrained idea that there was more diversity and more Europeans in Orlando, Florida, out of DC. And I think even as a fourth grader, I was like, this sounds suspect. But we moved to Orlando until I graduated. I went to Florida State and then did a few years abroad and then just came back to DC. So I've been here since about 2007, so quite some time. But as I'm sure you can attest, having grown up here, there's just something about this city. It is so diverse. I think 97 spoken languages now here. And you just always feel like there's something really great going on. I love it here.
The first time I've ever heard Orlando being more diverse, and a lot of more Europeans than the DC area.
That's a conversation to take up with my mom for sure. But yeah, it was strange. But I'll tell you, as a kid, getting to move closer to Disney was not a bad thing. And I had grand dreams of being on Kids Incorporated and the Mickey Mouse Club for any of you listening that remember either of those shows. It did not happen. But I did get on a Nickelodeon game show, which was Legends of the Hidden Temple. It's on my LinkedIn profile. And for the people who show me you know me well, they'll read that and then they'll say, I have to know what show it was on. And please tell me it was Double Dare or Guts. And it just wasn't. But Legends of the Hidden Temple, I think, is just impressive.
So growing up, whether Florida or here, what were you into? Now that you mentioned these game shows you were involved in.
I was a big tennis player, as you can probably imagine. It's like the sport that we do in Florida. And it's interesting. I was just having this conversation the other day because I'm an incredibly competitive person, but I wasn't when it came to sports. I don't know why. I think I just enjoyed it, and this probably more the socialization than anything else. But played a ton of tennis. I wanted to be a horseback rider. My mom was like, "No, they're going to play tennis," and I was like, "No, all right." But it was great, being out in the Florida sun, sweating like nobody's business. Be as attractive as possible at all times. But it was great. It was so wonderful to do that. What about you? Did you play sports growing up?
Growing up, I played mostly soccer. And that
Yeah.
was just because a lot of my friends here growing up in DC, we were in the DC started soccer league there. So right
Oh,
after
cool.
school, yeah, we would go to soccer practice and then the matches on the weekends. But my real passion was more towards basketball.
Oh, yeah. What do
Yeah.
you cheer now for college basketball, or are you more pro?
Well, I attended Maryland, so I'm always a Terps, yeah.
Yeah,
So you
you
have
have to
to,
be.
yeah, you have to be.
My husband's a big Kentucky Wildcats fan, so we cheer for UK, although I don't think they had a good season this year. Probably why I didn't hear much about it.
No, but they have a great basketball team.
It's true. Yeah, for sure.
So you said you attended Florida State?
I'm a Knoll. Yeah, I
Okay.
think I was there one of the last years of Bobby Bowden, who just passed away. I think even this week. So I was there 99 to 2003. But kind of back to the sales and entrepreneurial roots there. I just wasn't a big football person. I love to tailgate and everything, but going to watch the game and sit in the stands just never was my jam. So I always sold my student tickets. And for peanuts, but back when you're in college, like $10 makes a difference in your day. So I always sold them. I think I went to one game, maybe during my entire tenure there, which is always so upsetting. They're like, "We were there during the Bobby Bowden days," and I'm like, ah.
Yeah. What did you major at Florida?
Well, my fifth major was my final one. I thought I wanted to be a child psychologist. I growing up in Switzerland, I grew up in kind of an affluent community, you could say. And I went to Swiss finishing school with a lot of people who come from a lot of money. And I found that a lot of these kids were really screwed up by their parents. And I was like, well, maybe there's something I can do about that. So I'll become a child psychologist. But I remember a teacher, one of my professors coming in, and she was like, "I hate my job." And I was like, "Oh, okay, maybe not for me." So I ended up in business with a minor in finance, and really took to it. I think I wish that I had had a better college counselor who said, like, "You're so extroverted. You look for every angle. You take advantage of opportunities in front of you. You should be a salesperson." But it took me quite a few years to kind of land in this field and figure it out. But it's such a natural fit for who I am, competitive wise, extroverted wise, question asker that I am.
Yeah. Sam, I'm curious, growing up with two entrepreneurial parents, were you ever exposed to the business side of things? I don't know if you would be able to tag along to some meetings, or was there any influence there growing up?
For sure. So I think for my dad specifically, he, in running these hotels and being a general manager, from the financials and things like that, I wasn't exposed to that. But what it takes to delight clients, right? So I got to see such exceptional things that he did for the repeat clients that would come in, or the guests, or just thinking above and beyond. I think both my parents were very much grand gestures people, and which really has spoiled me as an individual, and then ruined me for basically every relationship that I had. I'm like, why isn't there a parade? It's my birthday. But how they did that with clients was so incredible. And it really taught me that can be such a differentiator, which is definitely something that goes into play today. I'll give you a quick example. Two of our clients at TransUnion and at Lessonly, two relatively well-known companies in general, two of the people that hire us, that work with us, are having their massive birthdays this year. So we just thought about one, making sure that we remember that for one of them, even though they told us 6 months ago. And for the others, we sent her flowers 90 days before her birthday. And we said, let's start the celebrating early. And that kind of stuff, it's such a minimal expense for a business, but it really makes somebody feel special. It knocks them back, right? They're so excited about it. And I think on my mom's side, she was so gregarious and just such a connector, could light up a room, all this stuff. But the way that she negotiated, the way she built relationships, the way that she really put the relationship first before ever talking about business. And frankly, the way that she could just connect with everybody. getting to see that definitely bled through and, is a good descriptor of who I am today too.
So you just mentioned your mother and all these great qualities. Would you be right next to her sometimes in some of these conversations or meetings?
For sure. And I think a lot of it, honestly, it took place around dinner tables. So this
Okay.
wasn't, us being in conference rooms. This was, let's grab a drink, let's get together, let's go and, have dinner or get to know one another or come to this cooking event that we're going to at this fabulous hotel in Venice somewhere. And just things like that, where again, the focus was really like, I hate this term, but let's break bread before we do anything else. And it was just fascinating to see that. I think even as a salesperson, I remember one of the very first lunches that I had with a chief marketing officer, Felice Wagner. I'll tag her in this so she knows to listen. But she and I had lunch. This was one of my first CMO meetings, and I was so nervous. I was like 12 at the time, a little bit older. But we talked about nothing related to business. I just took the time to really invest in her. And I remember afterwards, my CEO said, "What did you talk about at lunch, business wise?" And I was like, "Well, nothing actually." And he's like, "Well, you can't expense that. You didn't even talk about business." And I remember just the feeling of like how wrong you are, right? Like, and Felice came back and said, "You're the first vendor to take me out to lunch that didn't have an ulterior motive. Like you really wanted to get to know me." And, and we're friends to this day. And it's been, probably about 15 years since that lunch. So just the value of just giving, caring about somebody and taking the time to really invest in who they are makes such an impact for everything that they can do for you in the future and the relationship that you build professionally and personally.
I love that. And as salespeople, and I personally believe everyone's a salesperson. It doesn't matter what your product or service, you can be a doctor, a janitor. I think everyone's in sales. And it's hard, especially when you're a professional salesperson and you're in a meeting, whether breaking bread or drinks or whatever it may be, to not ask for that, whether order or just talk about business is not that easy.
Right, totally. Because you want to get somewhere, right? You've got your own motives, you've got a quota to hit, you've got new business to close. And I think that can be tough for people, even on discovery calls, right? We talk about the art of showing me, me, building rapport, really understanding who that person is. But so many people are like, well, I have 17 questions here that I want to ask this person. I need to solve for BANT. I need to get to a next step. And we're like, slow your roll, right? Like be smart in how you build pipeline, get more of those meetings and those at-bats, take the time to build that relationship and watch what happens because you were different. Just by being different, right? Is such an easy way to stand out. I also think that buyers these days are so over just how many salespeople reach out to them. At scale, you can do everything with outreach and with all these platforms today. There's so much you can do. So taking a second to just be different and stand out in a positive way and maybe not make it all about you can sometimes make or break the deal or you even moving to that second step.
It's so true. It just reminds me, I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago with a client and we're touring office space and he starts telling me, he was like, "I love your post on social when I talk about my children." And it just came out of nowhere. We were just talking. He's like, "I love it. This is great." And I'm like, it's just different when you're getting to know one personally. Just let business for a side, put it to the side, and it's just whatever your interests are, family, friends, whatever it may be.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, the concept of doing a little bit of research on someone, to be able to form that rapport, to understand a little bit about their background, right? We can do that really easily on LinkedIn. If there's nothing on LinkedIn, look to see if there's something on Twitter. I think that's about as far as I would push it in the social platforms. I don't want to go on Facebook and be like, "Hey, I saw your family on vacation." You're going to be like, "That's really creepy. I never want to talk to you again." But even if we can't find something about that person, what can we find out about their company, right? What can we find out about their vertical, this space? What's going on in the press, right? Something to talk about. Anything too, there's so much value in the idea of executive presence on calls. And executive presence to me is doing that homework, is showing me me, right? By that research, not by saying, "Otto, how's it going? How's the weather where you are today?" And you're like, same as you, since I'm in Maryland and you're Virginia. And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Right. Like I show that I haven't done my homework at all. I have no idea where you are. And the fact that I show up and I just say, "What's the weather like?" Right. That's a crutch and it's, a lazy move. So all of that really pays off.
Yeah. So coming out of Florida State, obviously you didn't know all this with your business degree, but what happened after graduation?
Yeah, so I spent some time abroad for about 4 years. Then I came back. When I came to the DC area, probably much like everybody else, I fell into sales. So I got bored really quickly as soon as I came back. It was impossible to find a job. And then I remember seeing an ad in the paper for a marketing role. I took the marketing role. It was right in the 2008, basically, financial crisis. And so that company laid off basically half of the staff, myself included. But something that was really impactful and frankly changed the trajectory of my career was in that marketing role, we had access to so many executives outside of the company that were clients. And I built relationships with everybody, took the time, exactly what my mom taught me to do, right? To make it about the relationship, to build that. And I made, one of the relationships I made was with a gentleman here in DC, Otto, you might even know his name, Paul Villela. And Paul ran a company called Hire Strategy. It was a massive recruiting firm in Reston, Virginia. And Paul and I were supposed to have lunch to get to know each other better, et cetera. The day that I got laid off, I called Paul and I, of course, kind of calculated, said we can't have lunch anymore. I was just laid off. And he's like, I run a recruiting company, come in. And I was like, oh, okay, great. It worked out magically exactly as I'd hoped. And the first job that was offered to me was a recruiter. And that didn't really fall in line with what I wanted to do. But they offered me a sales job with one of their clients. And I said no. They were persistent and said, you don't have to do anything terrible. You don't have to make cold calls. You don't have to do any of that. Just come be an account manager, right? Help us land and expand and do that. And I was like, well, all right, how bad can it be? And thank God they were persistent, right? And pulled me in, because otherwise I might still be in marketing, which is a lovely job, but man, was I made for sales.
So with that original job, is that what brought you to DC?
I was already here.
Oh.
So I had landed here. I was trying to, because I always knew that I wanted to come back to this city. I just loved it so much. So I moved back here after being abroad for a few years. And it's interesting because I couldn't find a job for the first month. And so I went and I actually applied to a job at Pottery Barn as a manager. And again, you're familiar with the area, but we opened the biggest pottery barn in the United States in Tyson's Corner. And we got to, build it and do all this. And I loved the job. I hated the hours, but man, did I love the client engagement. Also, the pay, not so great. So when that marketing job came around, I was like, I'm going to take this. This is fantastic. And then, the rest is really history from there.
So in that first sales role, was that tech?
It was tech. So it was a webinar platform based out of Richmond, Virginia, but I was remote in DC. And we probably about a year or two, but then we started reselling a company called On24. And On24 is where I went on to spend quite a big chunk of my career, about 6 years, and probably sold the platform for about 9 years total. So I was an account manager for 2 years. And then our CEO came in, he had a huge role at Dun & Bradstreet as one of the top sales executives there. He came in to run our tiny shop and to basically turn it around. And I remember him saying, we're gonna promote you. So I'd been doing account management in the enterprise space for those 2 years. And he said, I'm gonna promote you to be an account executive, to be in the enterprise space, and then let's see what you can do. And I'll tell you, I hyperventilated. Being a net new account executive means you have nowhere to hide. I have no accounts to farm. I don't have anything. I have to go find business. And I'm like, how in the hell am I going to do this? Plus, it made me feel like I was going to put so much risk on my finances, right? What if I didn't succeed? What if I got fired? What if I never closed a deal? It was terrifying. But I think, enormous kudos to him, because he really saw the potential in what I could do. He saw the way I engaged with clients. He saw the way I engaged internally, and said, I think she can do this. And he nailed it.
That's great. In that role, I'm sure there's some type of base plus bonuses or commission, right?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'll get very vulnerable with you guys here. So I think my salary at the time was something like $57,000 a year. And then I think I made 10% or something like that on every deal that I closed. And I was like, 10%, this is amazing. I remember the first time that I was working a really huge deal that I ended up getting, and I calculated that my commission could be $12,000. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, I have to do this forever, right? It was mind blowing money to me 12 years ago, whatever it was, right? It's mind-blowing money to anybody. It's unbelievable. And I remember just kind of seeing the value in that and just being able to do that. Even when I think I got my first raise, it was like $3,000 raise. I was like, made it over $60,000, like $60,300 or something like that. But it was when I ultimately left that company that I started to think about like my value, right? What I brought to the table, how it felt like I was so different from my peers in terms of performance, and where I really pushed the gas in terms of negotiating for my worth, not just, a little bit more than I make now, but this is my worth. This is my value to the new company.
Sure. So what was a new company?
So then I moved to On24 directly.
Okay.
I think a good learning experience there. My previous company resold On24, and when they were reselling it, they made a decision to switch vendors and to resell another platform. The platform was not great. In fact, it was really bad. And it took me probably about 10 days of seeing that platform in action to think, I'm going to burn every bridge I've built, because I'm representing a company to the clients that trust me, right? That doesn't work. And so I remember quitting and saying, I don't have another job yet, but I can't do this. And when I quit, again, my gracious CEO called the head of sales, who I was just talking to yesterday, was no longer there, but and said, she's leaving. If you want her, make a play for her. You'd be so lucky to have her. It was so incredible, right? Where a normal, leadership team might say like, good riddance, don't let the door hit you and be angry. Instead, he was like, let me figure out how to make a win-win for both of these companies. It was that, getting to jump ship and then getting to say, well, if you want me, this is what I need.
I'm happy you mentioned that, Sam. And there's many times that we're in positions where we are working with a company, maybe we do not see eye to eye with several things there, and you're obviously representing them when you're out there in the public. What do you recommend? Just jump ship and move, or what are some suggestions someone can do?
Yeah, I think it has to fit with your your financial standing as well. I have always been a massive saver and just hoarder and hoarder and hoarder of money. Everything I earn, I'm like, let's keep it forever. Let's never spend a dime. It's also what motivates me to be so actively involved with financial literacy. I volunteer for junior achievement here in DC, and would just love to be able to teach everybody how to manage their money better. But I think that you've got to think about it too, exactly what you said, are the principles of the company out of line with what you're doing? Are, the products they're representing or the way they're making decisions, does it personally hurt you in some way? And I think for me, a great lesson back then was just to think, this is a long-term gain, right? I haven't built these relationships over the last 4 years at this company with all of these clients to let them go up and smoke. I'm somebody who has friends for 20, 30 years, and we'll just leave it at that age-wise. But I hold on to those, right? And just like client relationships, I hold on to those forever. That's a long-term game for me. So for me, it didn't fit, with a product that I was proud to represent. And it also didn't fit with a product that I felt like was the right decision for our customers. And I'll tell you too, in leaving, the board had made an offer to me and said, if you stay, we'll make you VP of sales. And I was like, what? And I mean, back then, right, being a little baby AM to AE and then hearing the word VP, where all you want to do when you're young is climb the ladder as fast as you can, I was like, well, maybe I do want to stay. And I remember a great client of mine just saying, if you stay, she's like, you might be a VP, but you'll be a VP of shh. And she used a little word there. And I was like, ooh. And it was just such a great call. And I was like, decision made, I'm going to leave. And that was it.
That's great. You stuck to your principles. It wasn't easy, especially when there's money on the line.
No. No, another $3,000 of a raise. Woo! No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, it was the right decision. And it was me trusting my gut and me staying true to who I am as a person.
Sure. So when you jump ship, you already had a home to go to then, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I quit, I didn't, right? But when the CEO was so nice enough to say, call the VP of sales at On24 and say, get this girl, then, it was a pretty easy move. And I'll tell you too, I think one thing that really impressed me about that process was for me as an individual, this is a huge company, right? I'm moving from a tiny little shop that, makes about $10 million in annual revenue to a company like On24 that's a Silicon Valley company, 100 million in ARR, all that jazz. So while it was a huge jump for me, I'm sure that they also recognize like, she's lucky to have us. But when I flew out to San Francisco, I remember getting to my room and the VP of sales had one of the executive assistants arranged to have a huge bouquet of flowers in my room and a little note to say, we're so excited to meet you. And I was just like, man, it really stuck with me. Think about grand gestures. Think about things that we can do different to really court candidates that we want, or just to show what our culture is like internally. It was a killer move.
Did you have to relocate to Silicon Valley?
No, so it was fully remotely based, which I had already been doing for several years with my previous employer. So that was a piece of cake. I started the day after I moved into this house, so in this very office, which is about 9 years ago actually. And yeah, it was wonderful. And it was just such an experience to get to move to a company that was so significantly better, had a different tech stack, had a different way of operating, different benefits. I mean, I really came in there eyes wide open to everything that I could learn.
How long were you at On24 for?
Yeah, so I was there for just over 6 years. So I broke a bunch of records there as an individual contributor and at the previous company. And then when I probably about 6 months into it, I said, I want to be a leader. Like I love being close to the deals. I love selling. I love the money, right? Because the skill set that you bring to the table in sales can really determine your financial success. But what I realized is I really wanted a balance. I wanted a balance of the income and everything, but another 20,000 or 50 or maybe even 100,000 wouldn't have been life-changing at the level I was already at. So what I really wanted was I wanted that kind of heart-filling, heart-bursting emotion of getting to impact somebody else's finances, right? Getting to help train them on how to be a better salesperson, getting to help them strategize on a deal that comes over the line, helps them hit their quarter or get to President's Club or Rep of the Year or whatever. That is the best feeling. And I think what bleeds through me is not only the idea of making positive impact, but the idea of creating economic opportunity for another. I don't think there's another feeling on this planet that mimics what that is for me to be able to do that for somebody else. So I really had my sights set on leadership and then rose through that track pretty quickly there.
That's great. What would you say was the biggest difference there, Sam, and On24 with, you have other colleagues there, maybe in similar roles, and they're probably not rising as quickly or doing things a little bit differently than you were.
I think, and I think it's true to this day in sales. I think that there are 5 to 7% of us who really know how to do this well, and I think that's also like where being different matters, because the great majority of sales reps haven't quite figured it out yet. They fell into this, or they haven't had great leadership or great mentorship, or they read something from, blog 800 years ago and they're like, oh, I should say, why aren't you getting back to me? Is it because you've been eaten by an alligator? And we're like, oh my gosh, right? So there's so much of that exists. And I think the same was true at On24. We probably had about 100 or 120 sales reps globally when I got there. And there were a few, mostly females, that were just powerhouses, right? That really, really got it, always hit their quota, always won the spiffs, all of that. And I think that was also motivating for me, because I was like, well, this is how I can up my game, right? This is now the bar. I was the bar before, but now this is the bar at On24, and I've got to figure out how to climb that ladder, and how to, level up to what these people do really well.
So you ascend through leadership there, and then what happens?
Yeah, well, I think even the story of how to get to the leadership spot is a good one to talk about, because this is what I get from a lot of AEs who are like, I really want to make that jump to frontline manager, but how do I do that, right? Or I talk to somebody who's like, I created a birthday club last year and I didn't get promoted, and that's ridiculous. And I'm like, well, what was your quota? And they're like 83%. And I'm like, no one's promoting you because you made a birthday club. Like, your job is to hit 100%. way plus of quota. So go get after it. But I think for me, that was the kind of aha moment for me. It wasn't just about, what could I do in addition to my existing role? It was, how do I crush what I'm paid to do, right? And I'm paid to bring money into the business. So how do I do that really, really well? And then how do I do more on top of that? So what I basically did is at that 6-month mark, basically ending the year of 2012, I said, okay, I've got to figure out how to kill this job next year. And so I did it. I ended up being the number 2 top performing rep in the company, followed only by the number 1, who was an account manager. And I'm like, that's not even a fair race, but that's all right. So, I was like, I also thought, I'm not going to let that happen next year. I'm going to be number 1, no matter what. There's the competitiveness for you. But what I did in that kind of the end of that first full year, when I thought, what can I do to get promoted? I had a conversation around Christmas time with our VP of sales. And I said, what are your top priorities? Like, what really keeps you up at night? What's the issue with the company? And 2 of the things that he told me about was, we need to figure out how to ramp reps faster, right? So it takes ultimately too long to ramp our reps. And we've got a problem with attrition that we have to solve. So what do we do? And so I said, I think I can solve both of those things. One, I create a mentorship program, right? So I'll build out our onboarding, I'll build out a mentorship program to connect with people, all this whole thing over the course of 6 months. And then kind of on the birthday club side, I said, I'll create a culture club. And, we as an organization, like many sales teams, looked at our people as numbers. Like, what have you done for me lately? How was your performance last quarter? We didn't think about them as the humans that they were, right? So what's going on in your family life? Did you run a marathon recently, buy a house, adopt a dog, have a kid, celebrate an anniversary? What'd you do? So I created those 2 programs. I watched their success, right? I looked at all of our metrics, and then I was able to present at the end of the year, not only having hit number 1 and being the top performing rep, but creating 2 programs that were wildly successful and made impact. And so when you look at that, you can basically command your next role, right? Your next leadership position, or just say, like, I'll sit here because there's not an open role, but just I need a ton more money. One or the other, which works out beautifully. But it was great. It was wonderful to be able to achieve that level of success and to be the first individual contributor there to get promoted to the executive ranks in their 20 or so year history at the time.
Wow, there's so much to unpack here. Okay.
Where do we begin?
Yeah. Number 1, Sam, how did you, within 1 year being in the company, you said over 100 plus salespeople, go to number 1 within just basically a 12-month period?
Yeah. So I think for me, I find number 1, the top performing reps always have process, and my own process is something I call if this, then that. So if I get an inbound lead, then I do this. If I'm pushing back from my desk at the end of the day, then I do this. It's all these little if this, then that motions that I have that are, just muscles that I built over time. 2, I think the other thing that I see in these reps is that they really understand how to ask questions and run great initial discovery, right? So tell me about your issues. Why did you show up here? What can we help you with? What do you struggle with? They're unpacking a whole mess of crap in that person's brain, right? So we can say, oh my gosh, we know exactly how to sell to you. And the other thing is that I find a lot of reps will be like, oh, I have 4X or 5X pipeline. Like, I'm good to go. Or I already hit my quarter and it's August, whatever date. I've got 6 weeks to just like take off. And the rest of us are just like, how much more can I do in this quarter if I just keep punching the gas? And I think when you bring those 3 things together, it really made a massive impact. The other thing, honestly, is being such a relationship seller, right? I'm a challenger seller first and relationship seller second, because I really like to get people to push outside of the lines of thinking that they already have. But being so focused on building those relationships meant we got a ton of inbound referrals, or that I could go back to somebody and I could say, thanks so much for signing up with us. Let me check in and make sure we're doing a great job. We are fantastic. Can I look at your LinkedIn network? And can I look at a few people that you might know that I'd really love to meet? And that, instead of me sending 100 cold emails or making a ton of cold calls, which I've never done in my life, by the way, that way I can capitalize on the relationships there. I can gain instant credibility. I can get those meetings quickly, and I can get those deals over the line really quickly. I think that year I ended at 132% of quota. And I don't even remember what my closest competitor was. They were back there a little bit.
Wow. When building a relationship, sometimes, most of the time, it takes time. It is not as easy as just focusing on the transaction and closing it. And a lot of people, like you mentioned, there's quotas, whether monthly, quarterly, whatever it may be. How do you go about with that balancing line of obviously needed to close deals, but you're just focused on building that relationship?
Yeah, I think in a couple of different ways I can talk about this. A lot of what helped me get to where I am is insubordination. And I guess what I mean by that is even just thinking about our monthly or quarterly number. I remember being at President's Club one year in April, and my VP of sales says, I need you to bring this deal in this month. And I was like, well, I can't without heavily discounting it. And he's like, then heavily discount it. And I'm like, am I going to get quota credit for the full amount? And he was like, no. And I was like, okay, you're really motivating me to get that over the line. And so I was like, I'll do the best that I can. Did I do the best I can? No, I ignored the deal, and I waited to get it when it suited me properly, right? When I could actually get the money in the door and hit my quota, which is what I'm driven to do. Same thing in a leadership role. Hopefully no one from my past is listening to this, but in a leadership role, I had a leader, I guess it was Q4 of one year. And my leader said, you got to do everything you can to bring in deals this quarter. And I was like, no problem, you got it. We had one top performer on our team who had already helped us hit our entire team's number for the year. The rest of the team was really struggling, and we were probably in early November. And so what I did is I said, I don't want you to think about your year at all. I don't want us to think about the next 2 months ahead. The only thing I want you guys to do when you come in and day out is obviously take the leads that come in, but I want you to focus on building pipe for Q1 of next year. So we did that, and we obliterated our number the next year. I think we even excelled over the account managers for the net new business that they did in land and expand. And everyone's like, this is unreal. How did you do it? We did it through insubordination by saying, yeah, we're on it. And then really focusing on what we knew we needed to do instead of spending 40 hours closing a $3,000 deal when we could spend that time prospecting and building pipe for the year ahead.
Yeah. You were just mentioning earlier some of the things that helped you get to number one there. Did you learn that at the company, or was that through just by yourself picking things up, or?
I think this was just a lot of innate skill building, probably my parents' influence. And I think that my mom just helped me be really resourceful, right? So I think looking for every angle, opportunity, how do I do this? What's the bridge that I can connect here? And that's something I'm really, really good at. And it's where the hashtag samsales started, because when I would share my tactics, my ideas, my SAM sales hacks, my leaders, my peers, my leaders would say like, oh, we never thought of that. We never thought to proactively ask a client for referrals instead of saying, keep us in mind. That's a great strategy. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, it just seems so normal to me. And so I started to share this widely so that other people could take advantage of it. But, a lot of this just made common sense to me. The very first chief marketing officer I ever met with was a gentleman by the name of Jim Durham, who was the chief marketing officer of McGuire Woods, a massive, massive law firm. And I remember Jim saying, like, by the way, like, if there's anybody in my network that can ever help you, let me know. I'd be happy to make an introduction. So 95% of reps are going to be like, that's so awesome. Thank you so much. I'll keep that in mind. What I did was I literally stayed up the entire night that offer was made. I went through every single connection he had on LinkedIn. This was when we had wide open territories at one of my companies. And then I just said, here's the 100 people that I'd love to meet. How do I do this? And he's like, well, just send them an email and just say, from a friend of Jim Durham's in the subject line. Great. Executed, followed through, got the meetings, booked the deals, right? And I think that's a core that makes sense to me. That's the normal thing. Like, what else is more important? You've just had a chief marketing officer who's incredibly influential say that they'll refer you to anybody. Like, I'm all over that. Anyway.
Referrals are huge in any business. And I see how you went. What are some key tactics people can use as far as getting that referral business besides what you just mentioned?
Yeah, it's so our BDR at Sam Sales, Lily, is doing this right now. So I'm showing her all the ropes and she's like, what do I do here? What's the next step, et cetera. So this is the easiest thing. You hopefully have tons of fans of who you are as a seller, what your technology is, the products, et cetera, that you sell. And the idea here is that you want to take advantage of the fact that they love you, right? That they would walk through fire to recommend you, that they would buy you if they change jobs again. And what I love to do there is to come forward and just say, Otto, thank you so much for being so generous in offering to refer us, right? Or to help us build more relationships. And so what I'd love to do, if you don't mind, is take a look at your LinkedIn connections. And can I send you a handful of names that you might know that we'd love to get in front of? And if you've already professed your love for what we're doing, you're going to say, heck yeah, Plus, I'm not asking you to think about people. I'm taking that work off of your shoulders, right? So what I will then do is I'll go through your LinkedIn connections, much like Lily is doing for our biggest Sam Sales fans. And I'll come up with 10 to 12 names of people we want to get in front of. People in our core ICP, our core buyer personas, people that can, help us from an executive perspective, get us into our core buyer persona. And then I'll send that to you and say, I know this is a lot of names. I also know we're connected on LinkedIn to a bunch of people we don't know. So I thought I would just cast a wide net, and hopefully you know a few of these people and you'd be willing to make introductions. So worst case, you come back with one name, right? And you're like, I know this one person and I'd be willing to make that introduction. A little bit of effort got me a meeting. The thing that we fight to do all day long is to get those at-bats, right? So if I can do that with you, and if I can get 2 or 3 or 5, and then I can do that with 5 other people in my network just this week, I'm drowning in meetings, right? And just opportunities to open doors, opportunities to talk about what we do, opportunities for them to say, now's not the right time, but maybe later. And I'll be like, great, we'll nurture your buns off and send you our marketing materials and hope to God you think of us down the line. But what a win that is for any of us. And what an easy home run strategy to book more meetings.
I love that, Sam. You mentioned earlier when you sat down with the VP of sales and he mentioned one of the items was attrition, and you went about trying to build that culture. This is you still working remotely, correct?
For sure. Yeah, okay. Totally.
Which is interesting now during COVID times. A lot of companies have obviously gone to remotely because they have no other choice. Yeah. So what are some suggestions you would give them as far as building that culture remotely?
The most interesting thing, it's just dawning on me now, we didn't have Slack, we didn't have Zoom, we didn't have any of this back then. This was conference calls and emails, awful, right? But I think a couple of things. So for salespeople, I think sometimes salespeople get really bogged down by all the things that HR or corporate culture tries to do. We're going to meditate together or do yoga or do a trivia or whatever. And everyone's like, I don't have time for this. I got to go sell. So I think that there's other ways that we can do that, we can build that, and it's really by giving people what they need. And I think number one, what they need is they need the tools to be successful. They need the tools that they need to be successful, right? So thinking about that, are we offering them coaching, training? Are we maximizing their ability to use the tools that they have? Just by giving them something, a key and a path to succeed can be everything. The other thing that I would say is, don't forget to invest in the personal side of your people, right? Build that culture. Say that you care more about who they are, or just their forecast, rather. One of our clients today, we were doing our forecast call, and I helped lead their forecast calls to get them on track. And one of the individuals on our forecast call showed up early, and we probably spent the first 5 or 6 minutes of that call just talking about working out and his Facebook group and his neighborhood and things like that. But that small investment, I now know things about him, right? Where what I find most leaders do is they're like, hey, Sam, how's your weekend? Or what do you have planned for the weekend? Here's what I have planned for the weekend. That's cool. All right, so let's get to business. And you're like, cool, yeah. Can't wait, thanks, right? I know that person doesn't care about me. And that, from an attrition perspective, not only can that build that value in the relationship with your leader, but it can, can cause me to want to stay another 3 or 6 or 9 months, or really hesitate when I've got recruiters banging down my door, which, believe me, they are for every one of your sales reps out there right now. It is a feeding frenzy for talent.
I hear that a lot with a lot of companies I'm working with.
Huge, right? I mean, yeah, I think April was the turnover tsunami. 4 million people changed jobs, which I think was the highest number on record since somewhere in the 90s, which is crazy.
Yeah. You founded SamSales 2-3 years ago, right?
Yeah, almost 2 years ago. Yeah.
Okay, 2 years ago. So what made you jump off that cliff and sort of leave corporate, let's call it, and become CEO and founder?
I got my dream job when I went to LinkedIn. That was the job that I had prior to starting SamSales. I got to be a leader there. I got to be part of the management team and lead enterprise sales, which was unbelievable. I think the thing that kept resonating with me is just the idea of how do I maximize the positive impact that I can have? And even though I was leading a team and I felt so connected to everything that LinkedIn was doing, speaking on their behalf, being part of their marketing efforts, et cetera, I think what really kept pulling me in was the fact that every time I would post something on SamSales on of course, on LinkedIn, the comments, right, where people are like, I put this into motion today. You helped me win a deal. You helped me hit my quota, et cetera. And I was like, oh. And so I think it just the opportunity to take that leap, right? The timing was right. And I said, I just need to give this a shot and see how it goes. And I'll tell you too, so we started September 5th of 2019, right before the pandemic. And the first few months, we had a few clients who were like, we have no idea what we're doing with sales. We would love to help you. Always think, what would Sam do? But now there's no conflict of interest. So you can come tell us what to do. And I was like, all right. And we had just a few clients in those first few months. I think our receivables for the business that year were $6,000. So we really knocked it out of the park. But in the first few months of 2020, and especially when the pandemic hit, which I know seems, odd, our business just took off. So it's really what we've built in the last 15, 16 months is really where we made impact. And we just yesterday signed Yelp, which is not Yelp. We did sign Yelp. That was before. We signed Upwork, which was our 87th client. So we've made some strides.
Wow. So very big blue chip clients.
Yeah. We've got Morningstar, Salesforce, Google, TransUnion, Deltek, huge clients. But then we also have little guys as well, right? So we've got those 1 million in ARR, those seed rounds, those Series A who say, what do we do? How do we build a tech stack? How do we build process? How do we hire? Who do we hire first? There's so much to unpack when you're building a business. And it's a different challenge, with a Fortune 500 versus a not so Fortune 500.
You mentioned hashtag SamSales was established even before officially SamSales Consulting was opened, correct?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think 2014 was my first post.
So you started all this as far as developing your own brand and everything even prior to you opening SamSales.
Yeah, I think that's again, that's kind of part of who I am. I want to help as much as I possibly can. And it just occurred to me, again, with so many people saying, what an innovative strategy for things that seem so normal to me. I thought, well, maybe I'll just post on LinkedIn and just see what happens, right? And this is back in the days where I would get like 3 likes and be like, 3 people liked my stuff, like so excited. Whereas now it would send me into a sob. Just kidding. But I remember what was really impactful is the very first time that I posted my very first SamSales, Sales Hacker reached out. So for anybody in tech land, Sales Hacker well. They ultimately sold to Outreach, and now Max, who was the starter of Sales Hacker, runs a fund, an angel investment fund that I'm a part of and an investor in. So small, all the tethers there. But Sales Hacker reached out and said, we love what you posted. Would you be willing to write for us? And I was like, what? I mean, I lost my mind. I was like, yes, of course. Right. And I think this was also a time where I'd never been a speaker before. And I was like, I can't imagine ever being asked to speak and that, be credible enough to do that. So this was really that first foray into it. And they sent over 6 topics. They were like, here's 6 topics we need something to be written on, like choose one. And I'm like, I'll write all 6. And they were like, easy, Tiger, just write one. Let's see how you do. And then we'll go from there. I was like, okay. But I think for me, that was such a motivator. If somebody like Sales Hacker saw my rather to me generic sales tip and said, this is great, come write something for us, I might really be onto something. And for me, it was a lot of extra effort. It's, even today, I spend an hour on LinkedIn in the morning. I spend an hour on LinkedIn when I'm in bed before I go to sleep, just commenting and engaging and things like that. That's a ton of work, but it makes me feel so full because I feel like just even one engagement can really change something for somebody, and how great it is to be a part of that, even if I never know I am.
I'm happy you said this, Sam, because a lot of people out there may have a corporate job and they may be afraid or concerned. What if I say this? What will the company say? Or will they allow me to speak this way? And obviously you were doing this way before that.
Yeah, for sure. I think the thing to keep in mind, obviously, is it's a professional platform. So just think about whatever you post. Would you be proud of your leadership and your board, your CEO? Would you be proud of them reading this? Do you feel like it reflects the brand of the company that you're a part of as well? And I know that there's a lot of opinions like, oh, this is my personal LinkedIn page and then that. Yes, I agree. But for LinkedIn specifically, right, if you want to talk about something a little more controversial or political, take it to Twitter or Facebook or something like that. But on LinkedIn, just think about, is this adding value? Is this contributing to progress for other people? Is it something inspiring or that's educational to individuals? Is it promoting positivity? And I think if you answer those questions to be yes in general, then that's great. I'm a real big fan of talking about our failures of the past or being vulnerable or saying like, last week I posted about a sales rep that really bombed with me, but it's not about the idea of airing my grievances. It's the idea of airing my grievances, hoping that somebody sees themselves in that and says like, crap, that's exactly what I do. And she's saying not to do it. Okay, well, what do I do then? And then being able to educate people, like, here's the right way to frame this. Here's how you could have positioned this better. Here's how you could have been client centric and still gotten the deal. And so to me, like, it's really about just making sure that we're offering content that is meaningful and that your company will be proud of.
Yeah. I also love how you were building all this without you even knowing, just getting ready for that day. If that day were to come, that you were to hang up your own shingle.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's it. Like I am risk averse, unless we're talking about investing, and then I'm off the charts. But I'm mostly risk averse, right? I want to be smart and calculated and intentional. So I think starting my own business just was nothing I had ever really thought I would have the courage to do. And so building this brand was about just helping people and kind of having that be associated with my brand. But I will tell you, one, even getting the job at LinkedIn. So when I transitioned from On24 to LinkedIn, it was, I did a client testimonial for LinkedIn on behalf of On24 and talking about the value that we got out of Sales Navigator. And I almost fell off my stool, like with excitement about what happened. And when I did that, they were like, you have to come work here. And I was like, well, never say never. And then it all kind of fell into place. But Matt Loop was the hiring manager whose team I was going to be on. And Matt Loop was like, Sam, who? Matt never heard about me, right? So in our interview, while I could communicate so much to him, one of the things that I said was, if you really want to know everything that I think about sales, my philosophies, what I think about leadership, go check out my hashtag. And I think you'll see, hopefully you'll be like, yes to everything, but it'll really give you an idea of what's in my head. If you are looking for a job, what an incredible way to build a brand for yourself long-term about your personal beliefs and philosophies on whatever it is that you do. But I think the other thing, because I had already had such a well-established brand from speaking to posting to all of this stuff, it was easy for the business to come in because the credibility was already there. So for our clients that referred us to people like, let's say Matt, who doesn't know who we are, they could look so much up about us before and then say, wow, like this is great. We have to work with this person, right? So that definitely contributed to our success.
It's great that you had all this following when you actually opened samsales, but I'm curious, you being in corporate role to now you being the founder and opening your own company, it's very different. I know you've always been a saver, so you have that behind you, which is great. But you mentioned, I think the first year you did 6,000 in billings, I believe you said. So it's not easy. How was that transition, Sam, from W-2 to now being your own boss, having your own company?
Terrifying. I will say, I think 6,000 was our receivables. I think we booked something like 28,000 or something in those first 4 months, but that's also coming off the heels of a very, very, very successful year at LinkedIn, right? So even in those first 8 months that I had been there, every single year has been the highest earning year of my career, with samsales included as well. And we already hit our stretch goal for the year in July for us this year. So that path continues until at least next year, and then we'll see what happens. I think that it's an important thing to think about, right? Because you're foregoing that salary. If you are, and the benefits and the security and all of that. If you are a sales executive, right, and you work for a relatively large company, you're probably, making $200, $250, $300, $400,000 a year. You're basically lighting that money on fire by it not being there just by starting your own business. So it can be a massive risk, but I think this is also where entrepreneurs fails the wrong word, but kind of misthink about how to start the business. One, just make sure you have that salary saved up for how many ever months you need to, so that you can really make the right decisions for your business. But before you start, I would say really invest in your brand. Make sure that people know who you are, that you've built great relationships, that you start to float the idea of what you want to do with others to see how it resonates. But make sure you also know how to sell and how to follow through. So most of the smaller entrepreneurs that we deal with, they have absolutely no idea how to sell, right? They don't know how to develop business. So they might get an inbound lead, right? And that's great, but they don't know how to go get those leads. And then if they actually successfully manage their sales call, they don't know what to do to execute afterwards. One of my favorite entrepreneurs always says like, oh yeah, I owed them a proposal like 3 weeks ago. And I'm like, oh my God, you're hurting my soul. So if you are not great at business development, if you are not great at that follow through, make sure you have funding for that as well. Hire an executive assistant who can keep you, on track. Hire somebody that can be a BDR for you and go get business, right? Use these smart tactics to make sure that it's not just all on you, especially if you don't do one of those things effectively.
You've had such a rich career, and I know this is just the beginning. What would you say is something you're most proud of this far in your whole business career?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think honestly, I'm most proud of this business, and I say that too. It's not just the clients we've gotten and the revenue we've closed, but one thing that's really unique about our business is that we hire almost exclusively military and expat spouses. I'm a military spouse from a million years ago, and one of the things that occurred to me when I was there, as being an officer's spouse, is that there were so many spouses, and just like me, who were, unbelievably well educated. They had master's degrees, they went to Cambridge, they worked for titans of industry, and now they were stationed in the middle of nowhere with no economic opportunity. And I'm like, this is madness. Like, we're all so capable, right? But we're just stationed in Germany or Alaska or wherever. So we focus on that. And I think to me, it feels like we're supporting our country in a great way. We're capitalizing on talent that we would never be able to afford in our wildest dreams if they weren't in a random place with need for flexibility. And we get the opportunity to bring in talent that is just so incredible and really takes advantage of the flexibility that we bring them. So being able to do that's awesome. I just posted today about Dana Moon, who is our in-house comedian, but she's an aspiring comedian in LA. So she works for us during the day and she comedies, is that a verb, at night. And to us, it's really about like, you're helping us on our journey. So what can we do to help you on your journey to get the next job? Because you definitely don't want to die at SamSales. We know that you've got greater aspirations. So what can we do to build you up now, or to take care of your financial security right now until you go and off to grander, greener pastures?
I love how you mentioned your team just now, and having the right team, having the right people in the right seat in the bus is imperative. How do you go about finding the right people?
So I think I've always been pretty nitpicky and strict when it comes to hiring. It's challenging for me to find the right person. Even my very first hire was Katie, and Katie came to me after I probably went through 50 resumes, and on 24, my CEO was like, "Oh my God, hire!" And I was like, "Oh, they're all terrible." But thank God I waited, right? Because Katie ended up being a tremendously successful rep and actually has my old job now as an RVP and on 24. For me, I really look for a couple of things when I want to build great rapport on the call. Do you come prepared? Do you know where I live? Do you know where I went to school? I can't tell you how many executives and people I interview who are like, "So where are you based?" And I'm like, where'd you work before SamSales? It's basically an immediate deal breaker. You did absolutely no research in advance. You clearly couldn't give two poops about this interview. So I look for that first. I look for somebody that's had, a relatively diverse background, but it also isn't a job hopper. So especially in sales, 9 months, 1 year and 2 months, 1 year and 3 months. No thanks. Because I know what you do. You get there, you try to ramp, you're not successful, and then you hop onto the next opportunity as soon as you can. I also look for people who are just resourceful and smart. Nobody on my team, except for one person, our director of client success, has sales experience. Not a lick of a person has any background in sales. They might have been marketing. We have, a former director of marketing for a country music station. We have a former director of PR for 2 senators here on the Hill. And they, could barely spell the word sales when they got here. But give me somebody who is resourceful and smart and motivated, give them access to everything that I teach at SamSales, and they're all bona fide, incredible salespeople now, just because they learned the right way to do it. So that for me, for what we hire, that's some of the primary things we look for. Sure. Also, that you can write. Oh my God, we always ask for writing samples because people just cannot write these days. If you can't spell there correctly, one of the 3 versions, and use it appropriately, we're done.
What advice would you give someone who just brand new entrepreneur wanted to start their business, whether providing services or a product? What would you tell them?
Yeah, I think 2 important lessons that I see with entrepreneurs. So one, the heavy investment that they make in people or technologies that they think they need right away. I think really shoestring budget. It took us probably 9 months to build a website, and it was finally because one of my good friends, Robin Addis, who's been a client forever and is a Sam Sales client, was like, "You need a website," and I'm like, "All right, right." I was just fine, he'll do it. I also find that a lot of people build programming and training materials before they've ever sold it. So some of the entrepreneurs I talk to say, "I've spent the last 6 months developing this and I have no idea if anybody wants it, but now I have to sell it." And I'm like, why? But some of the things that we sell when we're talking to clients, they're like, "Can you do this and this? And do you have training on this?" And I'm like, "Uh-huh." But we'll build it, right? Because we can do it. We know it. It's in our heads. We've just never done it before, right? But somebody wants to know you've done it. So do we lie? Yes. Do we get it done? Yes. But that's what I would say too, is just make sure you're not investing your time building something you have no idea if people want, right? I might build training on something in sales and people really need things completely in a different direction. So listen to the market, listen to your buyers, right? And build from there, not just on what you think that they need or what you're really passionate about.
I love that. What are some traits, Sam, you think that have helped you, that habits and traits that you use daily, whether in business or personally?
I think for me, the biggest thing is execution and follow through. It is really, really, really rare that I say I'll do something and I don't. And, I also just look for ways to make sure I've got stop gaps in that. So if I'm on a call with someone and they say like, "Hey, can you get us this?" And we're talking about a bunch of things, I'll say, "Sure, just 1 second." And I'm just going to email myself, give Bill this document, whatever. And then it's an unread email in my inbox that I know I'm going to do. But I've really trained myself to do that. We talk about the idea of give something when you say you will. It's a practice we teach at Sam Sales. And I'm sure you go through this probably weekly with people who say they're going to get you something and then they never do, right? Or they get it to you late. So if I say I'm going to get you a proposal by the end of the day, Thursday, and it's Thursday, and let's say something crazy happens, I've got to go to the ER or whatever, unless I'm like, bleeding from the head, I'm going to send you an email and I'm going to say something came up. I'm at the hospital. I know I promised you this proposal. I'll get it to you as soon as I can. First of all, someone's going to be like, "Oh my God, don't die." Then they're going to say, "I can't believe you actually emailed me." And then they're going to say, "Take as much time as you need." But if you need more time, approvals from your cross-functional partners or sales ops, or you need, more time to pull together a proposal or a data sheet or something, whatever it is you promised somebody, come to the time where you said you would deliver it and just say, "I can't because of this reason. I'm still waiting on this." And for me, that's just making sure that you're a priority, that I'm organized, I've got my ducks in a row, and that I'm getting you something when I said I would, even if it's not that one thing. I think about that with proposals. I send proposals out 9:00 at night because if I say I'm going to get it to you today, I'm going to get it to you today. And if I don't, and I get it to you by 12:00 tomorrow, most people are going to remember that. And they're going to be like, "She didn't follow through on her commitment." So I think for me, that's the biggest thing. That's what's gotten us these meetings, right? Is the commitment to focus on business development and sales while executing all the business we already have and making sure we follow through.
And it's very true. It's very rare that you find people who actually do follow through. And you definitely would stand out of the crowd if you do.
Completely. And I think with the exception of my financial advisor, who I adore at Morgan Stanley, who I've had for 12 plus years, I have to follow up with probably everybody on everything. He executes like a champ. If anybody out there needs somebody. But otherwise, I'm just like, "You said you would get this to me yesterday. Do you have it?" And they're like, "Oh, that's right." And I'm like, "Okay." Yeah. Can't wait to give you my business.
What's the biggest challenge with your role today at Sam Sales?
I think a good warning we got when we started this business was around the idea of, as a consultant, there is only so much of you. And so that's one of our challenges, is how do I scale myself? And I think that a really smart decision I made at the beginning of this was to think of lines of business that we could create that don't necessarily need me. They need, my talents, my framework, things like that, my ideas, but they don't need me to execute. So an example of that is like our BDR hotline. So we run a Slack hotline. It's individualized for every company. You assign your BDRs, you basically subscribe your business development reps to it, and then we coach them, train them, give them advice every day. well, I don't need to do that. I don't need to chair it because my chief of staff does that and she knows me inside and out. She knows all of our sales training inside and out. And then we've got a ton of BDRs on our team that work for our other clients that can help train them as well. And so that was a great way to diversify me without me needing to be there to scale myself effectively. But I think that's our challenge, right? There's only so much time in the day. The nice thing is we've had so much demand that our rates just keep going up, right? So we make sure we're investing in the right way and working with the right clients. But at the end of the day, something's got to break if we want to scale. One interesting thing we just did is I ran a series of trainings, and then I built a bunch of workshops for Show Me You Know Me that our teams ran instead of me. Huge success. And so that gave us a great idea, like, great, I don't have to be in that seat for those 3-hour trainings. Somebody else can do that after I've given the initial work. So that's our challenge, right? It's not how do we find more business, it's how do we fulfill the demand?
Yeah. Coming to an end here soon, Sam,
Yeah.
what do you know now that you wish you would have known at the start of your career?
I find one of the interesting things about being an entrepreneur is that it really shines a light on that humans are humans, right? Like I'm a person, you're a person, and getting access to you to sell you something or to talk to you about something really is just about building that relationship and being smart and being different. I think at the start of my career, I really looked at it like if I was going to talk to a CMO or a chief revenue officer, I was like, that is levels above me. And oh my gosh, how scary that is. And I have to like, hold my cards close to my chest and play a game when you can really be upfront about something. You guys have a challenge. I know you're struggling here. We can solve this exactly for you. Like, how do we open up a conversation about that? I wish I had been more confident in being able to do that, because I think that's also what's lent to our success here. It's just kind of when you're a consultant, I don't know, it's, there's not as much of a guarded behavior from your buyers. They're just like, we have issues, help us solve them. And I wish I had known to be more confident and comfortable with that conversation versus kind of playing the game, for a lot of years.
Yeah. Well,
that's my playing the game dance. Go ahead.
Starting off, you don't have that confidence. How can someone build it?
Yeah. You might stump me on that one. I think it's just starting to like step your toes out of the lines that make you comfortable and then see what happens. I'll say that maybe one of the reps I had once, she didn't feel comfortable sending a proposal out and then following up 2 days later. She was like, that feels very aggressive to me. And I'm like, it's pretty normal. You send a proposal out, now you want a response. And she used to wait like weeks and weeks before following up. And I was like, I'm like, weeks and weeks, like, oh my God, the person might be dead by now. Just kidding. But just saying like, why don't you just do this? See what happens, right? If they're like, it's only been 48 hours and they yell at you, then you're going to know that it wasn't the right move. And they might be the only one that's going to yell at you, but give it a shot. So she gave it a shot and they were like, oh yeah, we're going to get back to you tomorrow. And she was like, oh, okay, well, that was weird. It worked. And we're like, we know, now go do that again. Times 10. Right. So I think that's probably where my confidence came. Like I would just push the envelope a little bit and then wait and see. And then when it worked successfully, I was like, well, maybe I'll just push it a little bit more next time. And then eventually you're going to get bit in the ass, right? So I'm sorry, just my one curse. I think I said hell earlier, but anyway, you're going to get bit in the ass at some point. And then that's the line and the boundary, but give it a shot, right? And if it feels comfortable, just a little bit uncomfortable, go for it. One of my favorite quotes is the idea of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. So get out of the box a little bit.
Yeah, I love that quote too. What's the vision? What does the next 5 years look like?
Well, I think very surprisingly to me, we were fortunate enough to get an acquisition offer about 6 months ago, and that really knocked me out of my seat. We're so green, but I think the vision for me is to keep doing this for at least another decade. I just turned 40 a month ago, and I think I've got another like 10 years in me to see where this goes and what we do. Frankly, if we have the same financial results that we've had this year for the next 10 years, we don't do anything more, it will be the happiest little peach on the planet, because we'll surpass my every expectation while getting to make such positive impact. But if I'm really going to stretch ourselves, the vision really is to continue to grow our public speaking business. This year I spoke at over 30 sales kickoffs, keynoting for the likes of Morningstar and things like that, Facebook, et cetera. Grow that arm and then grow our BDR hotline because it's so scalable. It's incredibly financially rewarding as a company as well, and continues to allow me to employ these awesome military spouses and frankly just invest in our next generation of salespeople.
That's great. Last question. When you're not busy working, what do you like to do in your free time for fun?
What free time?
If that exists.
Right. Yeah. I'm a big Orange Theory person. So I go to Orange Theory quite a bit. I am incredibly social. I love to eat. Hence the Orange Theory. I need to balance that out. But incredibly extroverted person. I love spending time with my husband. I love traveling when we can. But getting out and about as often as I can is my jam. I think that pretty much sums it up.
That's great. Where can people find more information, want to know more about you or SamSales? How can they reach out?
Yeah, pop over to our website. You can basically get everything out of my head for free just by being a subscriber to our newsletter, which comes out every Friday. My website is samsalesconsulting.com. We also have a subscription of tons of sales advice on there called our shorts, which are incredibly inexpensive for a year subscription. So if you really want to make an investment in yourself, check that out. Otherwise, please feel free to say hello on LinkedIn. I'm very, very active there, and you can get so much out of me and my brain there, and all of our followers too.
Sam, thank you so much for coming. I had a great time.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure this was.
Yeah, it was such a pleasure. Take care.
Thanks, you as well.
Thanks. Bye.